Hello, everyone. My name is Jennifer Blank, and I'm a Director of Alumni Engagement at Regis. I am pleased to welcome you to the Office of Alumni Engagement's second webinar. Before we move into the presentation itself, I wanted to take a minute to explain how this webinar will flow. After this brief introduction, we will move into a 30-minute presentation. Afterwards, there will be a question and answer session for the remainder of the hour. Attendees will be muted the whole time. If you have a question, and we definitely encourage questions, please submit it using the questions and answers function at any time. I will be reviewing the questions throughout the session, and then I will moderate the Q&A by asking the presenter your questions. The chat feature is disabled, so I don't miss anything. This webinar is being recorded and will be posted on the new Regis University Alumni Association YouTube channel. Tomorrow, you will receive a follow-up email with the link to the YouTube channel as well as some additional information. Now, it's my pleasure to introduce our presenter, Scarlett Crawford. Scarlett has more than 15 years of international sales experience. She has lived abroad and conducted in-person, face-to-face business in more than 60 countries. She has led the global sales divisions of multiple companies in industries ranging from information technology to orthopedics. Scarlett is currently president and founder of Globix Link and a regular contributor on LinkedIn. She obtained a bilingual dual degree, a global MBA with a focus in emerging markets from Regis University and Jesuit University of Guadalajara. She also has an undergraduate degree in business. Today, Scarlett will generously share her vast experience with us about networking globally online. She will also challenge some of your perceptions, provide concrete examples of steps you can take and language you can use for reaching out, and highlight a networking weapon. So thank you so much, Scarlett, for sharing your expertise with us. Now, without further ado, Scarlett Crawford.
Hello, and thank you to Jennifer for the warm introduction, and of course a huge thank you to Regis's Office of Alumni Engagement for inviting me to present on such a relevant topic, and of course thank you for taking the time to attend and learn more about networking globally. So before we begin, I want to make sure that we're all on the same page regarding goals and expectations for today's session. I'll start off with what we won't be doing. We won't be going through every single social media outlet that exists. There just isn't the time, and there definitely isn't the need. And as we all know, when it comes to navigating the puzzle of every single social option, things can get messy. We want to keep it simple. The overwhelming message for today is that you don't need to be a guru who is on multiple platforms to network well globally. You just need a little bit of awareness and a lot of enthusiasm and perseverance. So by the end of the webinar, I'd like everyone to feel that networking is within their grasp, even with people from around the world. It should be viewed as something not only possible, but manageable. And after all, none of us wants to spend all day, every day handling their networking. Yes, you need to dedicate time and energy, but let's keep it to a minimum. And one small note. I will not be discussing any issues surrounding internet data collection or the safety of joining social networks. It's my assumption that if you're on this webinar, you do understand the importance of social networks in connecting with friends and colleagues globally, but have also taken any precautions that you deem appropriate. So now that we've covered what we won't be talking about, let's review what we will be discussing. This webinar will primarily focus on networking through LinkedIn and Facebook, because remember, we want to keep it simple. We're not trying to overwhelm ourselves, so let's just stick to the two primary social networks that are both familiar to us and generally used globally. We'll look at these two networks from a US perspective and then look at some differences that may surprise us. We'll also take a quick moment to understand how our social persona may or may not be hurting our chances at networking. We'll dive into some US-based comments, but also some multicultural food for thought that we can reference before making posts to a global audience. We'll also cover some social media typically not used in the United States, but don't worry. I said that I would keep it simple, and I promise I will. Since we're not trying to cover every network out there, I'll only give you the most important, and you'll know which ones are relevant to you now and which ones you can put into your back pocket for later use. And to visualize what we'll be doing today, the images on this slide represents how the webinar starts you off in the United States, makes the transition to take you around the world, but then I bring you back. I'll get you started on how you can literally start your global networking immediately after we're done here today. In this section, I'll mention some general assumptions about Facebook and LinkedIn from a US perspective to create a solid foundation of understanding. What are some of the words that come to mind when we think of LinkedIn? Professional, because LinkedIn is a place where we put a professional profile out there to the world so we can network, or at the very least connect with people that we might want to contact in the future. Perhaps this could be when we're looking at career options or when we want to highlight career achievements so we can expect more out of job hunting now or in the future. We may even hope that a recruiter or headhunter might see our profile, thereby expanding our options even further. And lastly, it's a great place to make a connection with a coworker that you might want to stay in touch with, but just one you don't know well enough to see on a more personal social platform. Which brings me to our perception of Facebook. It's just weird when someone you don't know very well tries to friend you on Facebook. There's a reason that LinkedIn has connections while Facebook has friends. After all, we only want to see friends and family on Facebook, and we want to share some of our more intimate moments like family vacations, restaurants we love, or other personal pictures or like, for example, concerts or our latest purchase. In other words, Facebook is personal. While we know it's not entirely accurate to say, most of us would like to think of Facebook as a safe zone, where LinkedIn is where you put your work face on to all. But in the next slide, we'll see that for true global networkers, our perceptions might need to change. Many of you know that Facebook isn't allowed in all countries. While the vast majority of the world uses it, the most notable example and the most likely to impact you is China. If you go to China, even on vacation, you will not be able to access the site unless you're using VPN or on your mobile phone. So we will cover China's primary social platform in a few minutes, but right now, let's look at some countries whose Facebook use isn't quite like ours. When I first started working internationally, one of my biggest surprises was how different Facebook use can be in some countries. And of course, I have a few anecdotes from my US perspective to illustrate that point. My first anecdote comes from my very first business trip to South Korea. I was in the middle of a presentation to a group of people that I managed in Seoul. The presentation was going very well, and then one member of the group suddenly stood up and started taking pictures, lots of pictures. Then immediately after taking the pictures, he uploaded them to Facebook and tagged every member of the meeting, including the VP, while I was still in the middle of my presentation. And my second anecdote is from India, where I was also presenting to a group. No pictures were uploaded during the meeting, but throughout the rest of the day after my meeting, I kept receiving Facebook friend invites, one after the other. And then I was pleasantly surprised to see that after I had accepted the original invitation, friends of friends were adding me. I didn't have to work hard to network in India. Their enthusiasm and friendliness and welcoming foreign Facebook friends did all the work for me. I have many more similar stories, but the takeaway is very simple. If you're considering working with other countries, or if you're working in international business, you may just have to accept the fact that others might see your Facebook page in the same way we view LinkedIn in the US, and know that this isn't a bad thing. You'll have the opportunity to get much closer to your contacts when you can see them on a more personal platform. While LinkedIn isn't as controversial in as many countries as Facebook, I have run into a few issues that could be major depending on the country you're trying to work with. First of all, LinkedIn is banned in Russia, so don't expect to see your Russian colleagues on it anytime soon. Now, in-depth information about Russia and Russian networking is outside the scope of this webinar, but if you're looking to connect there, I would suggest VK as a starting point, and I have displayed their logo for your reference. In Japan, the situation is different and a little bit more complex to understand. Now, for any country, I always recommend in-depth intercultural training before working there. But for the casual networker that may never visit Japan and may only make an occasional connection from Japan, I'll keep it very simple. The cultural expectation in Japan is that the employee is loyal to the employer for life, who of course the employer is also then in turn loyal to the employee for life. So an employee who is active on job hunting platforms like LinkedIn might not appear to be following social norms, and they may even seem disloyal. However, if you work with someone in Japan whose job requires them to work with foreigners, they might have a LinkedIn profile simply as a professional courtesy for their colleagues from other countries. Go ahead and connect with them. Just don't expect much interaction through that platform. Now, before we get to our social persona, I should mention that Russia and Japan were just a couple of exceptions to general LinkedIn usage. Keep in mind that even with those exceptions that exist, the vast majority of the world does use LinkedIn in the same way as a tool to reach across geographical barriers to forge relationships with other professionals. So we can proceed comfortably, knowing that most of us are on the same general page regarding LinkedIn. So now on to social persona. As we start to learn more about how we can reach out globally to enrich us personally and to potentially benefit our careers, we need to take a hard stop and seriously evaluate who we are online. What is the image that we're projecting? We all know that drunken party pictures are a bad idea, but when you're expanding your network, you need to expand your awareness. So for this slide, I will be preaching awareness again and again. I'm not asking you to make major changes, but I am asking you to be aware of what you post so that you're comfortable and able to anticipate and manage any repercussions. And right now, I'm going to be a little bit tough, and I'm going to suggest if you're not ready to make a change or two and incorporate at least some multicultural awareness into your social persona, you might consider postponing your global networking. So now let's examine some key concepts to be aware of. This amazing cocktail on the beach isn't a drunken party pic, right? So what's wrong with it? Well, who is in your network? Who are you trying to network with? Even if you're just in the US and happen to be networking with people that generally abstain from alcohol, this might pose a problem. And the same can happen in other countries where a majority might find alcohol offensive. Now, I'm not saying not to post a picture of a drink. Do it if you feel like you have an appropriate setting that can be easily understood by all of what I will call your target audience. This might be entirely different if you work in the hospitality industry or sell spirits for a living. Remember, this slide is all about awareness and does not have to be an immediate call to action. You might also wonder why I placed the bacon cheeseburger on this slide. After all, it looks delicious, and why wouldn't you want to share your burger with your entire social network? Again, the answer is post it if you're comfortable. I personally would avoid it on my own Facebook feed because I have a lot of contacts from countries where they either don't eat beef, don't eat pork, or don't eat a combination of meat and cheese. And I know that not posting this is entirely my choice. I also know that my contacts really probably wouldn't hold it against me. But I am making a conscious and an aware choice to make them feel comfortable and therefore make my networking easier. I mean, if I post this, how will I feel in tomorrow's meeting with the VP who is deeply offended by beef? Now let's take a break from food and drink and talk politics, or better yet, don't. I've actually written an article on LinkedIn on how to handle political situations in international business, but all I can say now is that it is sticky, yucky, and not something to discuss unless you are absolutely forced into giving an opinion. And even then, be vague. It's totally okay to say that you don't like talking politics, even if the absolute opposite is true. But just like it's a terrible idea to post any political content for your US audience, it's really the same for your global audience. And I know we've all had to restrain ourselves on certain occasions. I definitely have. But I ask myself, since when has any opinion on any social media changed anyone's mind? It really doesn't. There's truly no place for it if you're serious about networking, unless you work as a lobbyist or for a political party. But again, I don't want to tell you not to post it. Just be aware of your target audience. Lastly, the adorable picture of the baby and the dog is just something I threw in to show how difficult it can be to make decisions on post. This is just here for awareness. And again, know your target audience. Dogs are considered unclean to many of my contacts in the Middle East and North Africa. And even in other cultures, such as many of my contacts in Latin America, feel that Americans are just a little bit too close to their dogs, and this picture could make people squeamish. So I don't think I'll ever stop posting pictures of my dogs. But I would make sure that it's a little less intimate than the one we're seeing here. My connections really do understand that Americans like dogs. But I'll use my awareness and I'll post those pictures infrequently and with a little bit less saliva on them. So now that we've discussed LinkedIn, Facebook in depth, I'd like to make some recommendations about non-US social platforms that you might consider. And while there are many social messaging apps out there, the one that has really taken hold globally is WhatsApp. According to their website, they have over 1 billion users. And to be honest, I totally believe it. Seems like everyone, anywhere I have ever met in a developing country, is very actively using WhatsApp. And it's such a behemoth that it was purchased by Facebook in 2014 for a whopping $16 billion. Now, while it was purchased by Facebook, the user experience is nothing like Facebook, but it's an indispensable tool for those who live in countries where text message and even phone rates are prohibitive. And while this may sound counterintuitive, in my travels, the most expensive text messaging plans I've seen are in the countries where people can least afford it. So using WhatsApp has allowed them to use either Wi-Fi or data and bypass their prohibitive plan costs. It's also very social, since many people form group chats. For example, when I was working on my MBA with Regis, which, as Jennifer mentioned, was a dual degree program with a sister Jesuit school in Guadalajara, we had students all over the world, and we formed groups on WhatsApp to communicate about classwork or projects. It was a cheap and easy way to reach people from the many countries that were represented in my multinational group. This is the one app that I strongly recommend that you download if you plan on having any personal interaction with people from other countries. And you might even use it on your next trip overseas. But you will especially want this if you want to do business in other countries. I can get a hold of top contacts on WhatsApp within minutes, whereas they could take weeks to answer me via email. Checking WhatsApp before checking email is just part of the culture in some countries. As I mentioned earlier, Facebook is blocked in China, so you will be able to make LinkedIn connections there, but don't expect anyone to look you up on Facebook. The platform you will see used everywhere in China is called WeChat. It is something that's very unique, and I want to spend some special time on it so that those of you who may work in China don't miss out on opportunities. I'll share with you an embarrassing anecdote as an example of what not to do and why you absolutely must do your homework on WeChat before you go to China. I'd already been to China several times for business meetings, but I'd never had the opportunity to do a trade show. So when headed there for my trade show, I coordinated with my marketing team, we hired a translator, and I felt like I was fully prepared to represent my company at our booth in Beijing. However, what I found is that no one wanted our very expensive translated marketing material. They just didn't want the paper. They kept asking for our QR code. So I rapidly made a few phone calls back to my headquarters in the US and had an IT person send a QR code that he'd linked to a special marketing page for us. Now, of course, this wasn't easy, and this poor IT guy did this at very odd hours based on the time zone differences. But I then printed up a bunch of these QR codes that our IT guy had given me, and I was so excited that we finally fit in at the show. However, very sad to say that my QR codes were totally worthless because they were not WeChat QR codes. So we spent thousands of dollars on this show, and we're very embarrassed to have completely failed, all because we didn't fully understand WeChat. And as you might tell from my personal experience, all companies in China seem to have QR codes for the company information and for any separate marketing campaign they might have. A company's potential customers just scan the code and go. It's wonderful. Even people have QR codes. And here you're seeing a couple of screenshots from my personal WeChat. The top is my own QR code, which you could scan to be connected to me. And then the second is similar to the screenshot I used from WhatsApp. It's just a chat, and it looks similar to any other chat. However, even though you can't see it here on the screenshot, WeChat also does have that capability of being used for groups, phone, and video. And because it's a hybrid between personal and business use, I really recommend it for those of you who go to China, as it can be extremely useful. Don't be intimidated by it. It is fairly user-friendly, even though some of it is in Chinese. So now that we've been around the world, I'd like to bring you back. Remember, this is all about simple, and it's all about how you can start networking right away. This slide marks the beginning of the how-to section of this webinar, showing us the steps we have to take to get started immediately. And the very first thing you'll want to do is identify who you want to be as a networker. Understand your networking style and needs. And you can do this by asking yourself some very simple questions. Number one, are you working in or pursuing a career in international business? Number two, are you working or do you plan to work in a company where you may have international colleagues? And number three, are you uncertain how you'll use global networking but would like to take first steps? There is no right or wrong answer, and your attitude may change as you progress throughout your career. That's perfectly fine. As we discussed earlier, it's all about awareness. In order to make the right decisions, you need to be aware of what your goals are. Spending 10 minutes a week on your networking will work for you if you're not in a hurry. But if you're more moderate or want to jump in at full speed, you still really don't need more than 30 to 60 minutes per week, but you do need to be dedicated. Now, remember, most of us check our social networks with at least some frequency, so just take a little of that time for your focused global work. Know your target audience. I've been in the enviable position of having worked on all continents, getting to know people and networking the world around. It's been amazing, and I would not change a thing. But it does force me to maintain an extremely cautious social persona. If you decide to specialize in a certain region, then you will have a little bit more freedom. Regardless of what you decide to do, I can't stress enough that should you pursue interest in a specific region, please seek out multicultural training, formally or informally, if this interest is more than passing. Now, you can use the general guidelines that we discuss in the webinar, but you will need to take that deeper dive to understand your target region or country in order to really network well with that target audience. But if you're casually and cautiously networking, don't sweat the small stuff. Just use your common sense social persona and don't say anything that would get you in trouble at home. Have an open and unaware mind and keep your eyes open for new and interesting information. It's extremely rewarding when you can learn from your new international contacts. The third major point in bringing this back to you is use LinkedIn strategically. Now, before you hop on LinkedIn, if anyone here is starting to get nervous about networking online, I added this picture of that old-fashioned happy hour type of networking we had to do in the past. While meet and greets are still very useful in many settings, by their nature, they can exclude people, perhaps those who don't wish to drink, those who aren't invited, of course, introverts, or even just women who feel uncomfortable walking up to a group of men. So for those of you that are nervous, I have great news. Online networking, especially on LinkedIn, is a huge equalizer. You can have great professional relationships at any time of the day or night with people in any time zone. I mean, you can even sit in your pajamas in front of the computer and often get more networking done than in a crowded room at cocktail hour. So getting to this networking, first of all, are you connecting on LinkedIn with all of the people you know? Make sure you're doing the basics. Have you been given someone's business card? Why not add that person to your virtual Rolodex? If you feel weird adding people, just think of a few things. Number one, who doesn't want professional connections? And number two, what if you want to get a hold of that person in a few years? Or even better, what if they want to get a hold of you for a job or just for your skills? If you don't connect, it will be impossible down the road because you were just too nervous to send the invite. So smile and send your invite. Quick note, an exception might be your current direct boss or a colleague you don't get along with. And that's just because in some circles, it's considered more appropriate to add a boss once you're no longer their direct report. And of course, don't connect with people that don't like you or don't have good things to say about you. It probably won't go well. Now, aside from taking people's business card and connecting with the people you already know, which is the absolute basic, remember, you can meet people at conferences and trade shows and then follow up with them with an invitation to connect on LinkedIn. Just make sure to add a note to your invitation. I always like to add something that gives them a real reason to connect with me. I'll keep it simple, and I'll say something like, "Dear so-and-so, it was such a pleasure to meet you at the XYZ conference. I'd love to connect, and please feel free to reach out to me if I can ever be of assistance." This serves the purpose of reminding the person where we met, and then, of course, letting him or her know that I'm a useful connection. Again, don't be afraid to do this. Be afraid not to make connections. Don't be that desperate person looking for a job who doesn't remember any of the amazing people that he's crossed paths with. And because we've spent so much time on Facebook, I don't want you to be disappointed if you don't suddenly get an onslaught of friend requests when you start virtually networking. If you're a cautious or even a moderate global networker, it could take a long time. In my experience, you really see the uptick in Facebook requests once you have a working relationship with global colleagues, but the same could absolutely be achieved through strong LinkedIn connections. Either way, Facebook is essential to be aware of and will be a strong tool for you in the future, but our first step is definitely LinkedIn. Now that we've discussed some basic LinkedIn tips, I would like to present you with your secret networking weapon. In case you weren't aware, LinkedIn has a somewhat hidden but absolutely amazing tool that allows anyone to network with the target audience of their choice. That's called LinkedIn Groups. And it's just what it sounds like. These virtual groups bring like-minded individuals from around the world together in a single location. And guess what? Many groups are dedicated to networking and involve sharing professional ideas in a safe setting. No cocktail hour here. You simply choose your area of interest, as wide as you can think of, anything from law to medicine, academics, environmental health and safety, or whatever else you're into. And then you join a group dedicated to sharing that topic. And if you don't have an area of interest, just join an open networking group. Once you join the groups that best match your interests and goals, well, let the networking begin. I'll give you some tried and true techniques. First of all, share articles. I love to publish my own, but you definitely don't have to do this. It takes a while, but when you consistently post relevant articles in your groups, you'll end up with followers and sometimes get connection requests from those that start to see you as an expert voice in your field. Here is one example where I've reposted an article to a group. I made a comment about the article, about why I think it might be useful for other group members. So providing beneficial information is one way to contribute and possibly gain connections who are interested in the same subject matter. Secondly, comment on articles. My favorite is to be the first one to comment on an article about a trending topic. Now, due to my strict social persona, I avoid anything controversial. So I'll usually pick a topic that I know a lot about, make an insightful comment, and sometimes end up in intelligent conversation with interesting people. In this particular example, I'm engaging in a light discussion regarding those that use Airbnb for business travel. But I'm not trying to be a subject matter expert here. I'm stating that I love Airbnb for vacation, but I'm asking for someone else's expertise in how to use it for business. You don't always have to be the expert. Give others their chance. And also, don't be afraid to select foreign articles to comment on. As long as you aren't ignorant about the topic, it's a great way to network globally. If you're active with the basics and doing well in your groups, but still not getting connections, just ask. First of all, make sure you're in the right place, such as the open networking group, and then reach out with something relevant to a group. So for example, with some of the international groups I belong to, I might say something like, I'll be working in Egypt for the first time, and I'm looking for your tips and tricks. Please send me a connection request if you'd like to discuss this topic. People love to talk about themselves, and people love to be experts. So if you post appropriately, you will be rewarded. Another way is to reach out to friends of your connections. Be cautious, of course, as you don't want to burn existing connections. But it's generally safe to send a note saying something like, I see that we have mutual connections, and we're both interested in multicultural consulting and sales. I'd love to be part of your network to share ideas. And if you've been contributing with articles and comments, there's a very good chance that people will look at your profile. So on your LinkedIn profile, make sure you check the Who's Viewed Your Profile section very frequently. And if you feel bold, send an invitation to connect to someone who is looking at your profile. After all, they were obviously interested in you. Some people want to network and are just too shy. So I've made some of my best connections by doing this. Lastly, there's no point in gathering up contacts just to have a large collection that you think you can call upon when you need a job. In order to truly get the best response, you need to show value to your connections and then pop up from time to time to provide them with information and to let them know that you're thinking about them. WIFM stands for What's in it for me, meaning what's in it for your connection. Why should they be connected to you? And then at some future date, why should they be ready to give you job information or help you with some other topic? LinkedIn should be a give and take relationship like any other, even if it's very infrequent. How frequent? How often should you reach out? Well, don't be a creeper. There's no need to talk more than every 6 months to a year or even a little more. And when you send your connection something, again, make sure it's of value. That sounds a lot easier than it is. An example might include sending a message when something of interest has happened in their country. For example, right after the last serious earthquake in Taiwan, I made sure to send my connections messages, making sure that they and their families were okay. They really appreciated it. And if you get to know them a bit more, you can always wish them a happy day on their country's national holiday. And if you work closely with those in the Middle East, they will usually appreciate a simple Eid Mubarak message, if your relationship is close enough. But your contact with them doesn't have to be too detailed. Sending an informative article is always appreciated, as is sending news about your contact's company. Many foreign contacts love to see what the US branch of their company is up to. Bottom line here isn't the detail of what you do. It's doing something professional, something that shows that you're thinking about your contact, and something that demonstrates value, so that they know that you are a real connection and not a number. You don't only want to call upon them when needed, but they also want to call upon you to have value and knowledge, and they should appreciate your attention to detail in maintaining a relationship. And that's really the way to have those connections develop and stay strong. So today we quickly went around the world and came back, covering the basics of what to do when networking globally, and then how to actually get going. We kept it simple but powerful and discussed the most important items you'll need to succeed. And remember that everything we've learned is a guide to get you started. I promise that you will be able to move forward and make more connections with the tools given here today and with your motivation. But you will need to continually learn and evolve. Find what works for your personal style and build upon it. Don't give up. Look at what others are doing. Imitate what you like. Avoid what you don't. And the trick is persistence, consistency, and a healthy dose of enthusiasm. Networking can be incredibly rewarding, but Rome wasn't built in a day. Make sure you're in your LinkedIn account at least once a week, so you're available to new connections and continually nurturing your network. Be dedicated. And now, before we move to questions, I want to mention that I would love to connect with those of you who have now decided to actively expand your network. Please feel free to send me an invite at any time, and I wish you the very best of luck in your global networking. And I'll be turning it back over to Jennifer now for Q&A.
Thank you so much, Scarlett, and I hope everyone does take you up on your offer to connect. So everybody, she's serious about that, so please do. I'm going to throw in the first question out there is, you explained in detail about reaching out via LinkedIn. What about reaching out through Facebook?
Thanks. That's a great question. Reaching out via LinkedIn is something that the world is pretty much, as we've seen, almost all on the same page about. And even though we need to be aware that we're going to get Facebook requests, it's so difficult and it's complicated to really understand the subtle nuances of Facebook. So it's much easier, and I would highly recommend really to just wait for the Facebook requests to come to you until you're completely comfortable. And in fact, in all my networking, I generally don't send an invite. I generally just receive invites from people I've been working with or networking with.
Great, thank you. And now, just a reminder, everybody, there is a questions and answers button if you want to ask Scarlett a question. I do have another one here for you. Is there a country-by-country list for all the different technologies used?
Great question. So, there are so many different platforms. I think even in the United States, I think we'd probably all just get dizzy, trying to keep up with it and trying to figure out which we're going to use for what. I personally am not aware of any list that exists for, all regions and all countries. But it is one of the most important reasons why, you continually have to be learning and evolving. Keep your eyes open, imitate what others are doing. And, when you get to know people in these different countries, they can be they can be the best sources of information. And if they're doing something different, ask, feel free, definitely ask. I mean, I learned about WhatsApp because people were asking me, well, hey, why aren't you on this? So that's generally the best approach is to talk to your contacts and be flexible.
Great, thank you. So here's another question. What do I do if I connected with my current boss when we were not working together, and now she's my boss and I have her on both LinkedIn and Facebook?
Ouch. Yeah, that is very challenging. So for LinkedIn, I think it shouldn't ideally be a problem because you can always go into your settings and you can make sure that LinkedIn doesn't broadcast certain updates that you might not want to share. You can do that. Now, with Facebook, what you can do, there's a whole wide range of tactics here. The easiest, the most non-confrontational would just be to go in Facebook, you can choose groups. You can kind of segregate out your, friends and family, your work friends, that sort of thing. And every single time you make a post, just be extremely conscious of the fact that you're going to want to hit a drop-down button that then has you choose which particular group is allowed to see this. Or, if you want to take a more direct approach, and again, this is very situational, you might say, oh my gosh, you know what, this makes me feel really awkward. How about we put this, Facebook friendship on pause for now? That's up to you. I think really think about your social persona. I've had to maintain mine as being very strict for quite a while. So I don't care who's on my Facebook because you're going to all see the same thing. I'm unfortunately not sharing, my double cheeseburger with you. So it's up to you.
Great, thank you. And I actually use that too, having lived abroad myself and witnessing firsthand, like you explained. Facebook is definitely used very differently in some of the countries I've lived in, and so I definitely use that breakdown menu to post different things. So the next question is, how do you respond when you get a LinkedIn request without any message?
Yeah, I think I usually give people the benefit of the doubt. I usually assume that they're shy. And it sounds unusual for a lot of the extroverts that might be here and saying, well, what? It's online networking. Who cares? But there really are people that are hesitant to send an invite and get nervous before sending an invite. So the first thing I would probably do is I just would go and I would take a look at their profile and kind of try to figure out why would we have some sort of a connection. And usually the answer is right there. There's, oh, okay, well, they've gone to such and such a place and I have a lot of connections from that place or something like that. And there really truly are weirdos out there on LinkedIn. Luckily, I've only run across a few of them, but I still do give the benefit of the doubt. It's LinkedIn. They're not seeing pictures of my family. I would probably accept an invitation on LinkedIn and then, wait and see what happens, versus Facebook where I probably would not accept that invitation.
So the next question I have is, you talked about, I think, your experience in India where, people were rushing to, it was very easy to network.
Yeah.
Have you run into other countries like that, or maybe the reverse? Are there countries that you've experienced who show a lot of reticence, a reluctance and it's
Yeah.
hard to network.
Yeah. I mean, absolutely. I think that, you know, gosh, it's kind of, I guess you could go through country by country, would be a little bit boring, but I would say typically if you look at how that country kind of tends to interact on a personal level, like if you look at, let's say, you know, Latin America, where you're talking about, you know, people are very, you know, warm and outgoing, you know, I've never had problems networking there at all. I mean, networking people, you know, they want to network. And India also is as the case, as I mentioned, you know, where people are a little bit more reserved. You're going to see, you know, people in Germany, let's say, for example, where you're going to know that they're more reserved. And people in Japan, you're going to know that because if you're going to, like, let's say, you know, work in their country, or you have colleagues or something that are from these countries, you really should do a little bit of that study to understand what their personality is like, and you'll find that that personality really carries over into their networking persona as well.
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So we're going to go back to LinkedIn.
Yeah.
If someone doesn't use LinkedIn much, what do you think about, should that person get a premium package or not?
I just only recently started doing the premium package, and that's after I started, you know, my own consulting company. And the one reason I did it is because I really wanted to see who's been viewing my profile, and I have gotten the best networking, the best connections from that. I go back to these people who've, you know, looked at my profile after they've read an article I've written, after they've read an article I've shared or a comment, and then I connect with them, and it's been worth the money for me in that sense. But you know, I would say there's no reason to rush out and do it. You know, understand who you are. Ask yourself who you are. You know, we looked at that earlier. Are you gung-ho on this? Are you going to be more cautious? It's totally okay to get onto LinkedIn without that premium package and, you know, just network in the ways that we've discussed or in other new and creative ways that you think of. But just don't forget, if you don't have that premium package, you're not being able to send additional in-mails to people. I personally don't use a lot of that. Where I get my, you know, more bang for my buck is who's viewed my profile. That's where I get my networking.
So how long had you been on LinkedIn before you got that premium package?
Oh, years. Absolutely years. I mean, I don't remember exactly when I signed up for it, but it's been, you know, a pretty long time. And, you know, this is really stupid to admit. I'll go ahead and admit it. I mean, at first I was kind of hesitant to sign up for that because I was afraid that my employer might think that I was looking for a job. But the reality is nobody looks at your LinkedIn profile as closely as you do. Every little thing that you analyze, no one else is doing that unless you're looking for a job and, you know, a potential employer is looking for flaws on your page or something like that. I mean, I think you can, you know, every once in a while they run those first month free, you know, try it, see it if you'd like it. Or try the networking steps we've talked about here. Join groups, see how you like that. Say, I'm going to dedicate, you know, 20, 30 minutes to this a week. I'm going to find an article that I find relevant. And actually really quickly, while we're on the subject of groups, if you're thinking of joining groups, I would recommend get in there and join a bunch of groups at first, because there's a whole bunch of different sizes to these groups. There's groups that are like, you know, 100,000 people. And then there's groups that are, you know, a couple, you know, 10, 20 people. So which group do you get your most value? You could initially say, wow, I'm going to go to the 100,000 because I'm going to post an article there and I've got all these people looking at me, which is true, but you also kind of get lost in the shuffle. And if you go to too small of a group and people aren't active, well, that's where you really have to kind of experiment. You have to pick and choose, and you know, you can get a lot for free there without being a premium member at all, just by being in groups and being proactive and selecting and saying, hey, this group really isn't working for me. I think I'm going to leave the group, and then going out and finding another group, or, you know, just sticking to the same groups and being very persistent.
Thank you. Mm-hmm. We had a question, and I actually sent a quick response to get a little bit more clarification for this person, but there was someone who said she's added a ton of people and maybe she feels like maybe too quickly. And so, okay, this is on LinkedIn. Thank you. I just got the clarification. And she's not sure that they have any kind of shared interest or anything. Should she just leave them? Should she delete them?
Yeah. No, never delete a contact unless they're, one of the creeper people we talked about. There's no reason not to have the contacts at all. I mean, there's always a benefit to it. I think it's just a matter of remembering what you can and can't ask for or what might be inappropriate. So like, let's say 3 years from now, you've got this person that you don't even remember where you met, who they are, but they work at a company that you just applied for a job at, and boy, you're going to, email them and ask them for a favor. I'm not saying that you shouldn't do that. I'm just saying that you shouldn't expect a lot if you do that. So, you want to try to make as many connections, valuable connections as possible. But I've got over 1,500 connections. They're not all valuable. And I really don't, I'm not able to connect with every single person once every 6 months or something like that. I try to, send out messages as often as I can when it's appropriate. But don't worry if you don't know everybody. That's okay. And you can even get to know them too, I think, is the other thing. If you're very curious, you can just say, hey, I saw, we're connected and I just forgot, how do we get to know each other? If it's really bothering you. Otherwise, I would just leave them.
Okay. So that leads me to the next question is, so how much time do you spend on networking? Or maybe it's just so organic and part of, your consulting business and everything that maybe you can't really track it, but any sense of your networking, the amount of networking you do?
Yeah. It varies widely by seasonality. So right now in the summer, people are just not on LinkedIn. You're like right now, you're going to start off your networking. It's a good time to do it because if you make a mistake, really people aren't at work right now. They're not on LinkedIn. And actually studies that I have read have shown that most people use LinkedIn while they're at work.
Yeah.
But anyway, so and I am so sorry about that. Can you repeat that one more time? I got just a little bit sidetracked.
Oh yeah, no problem. How much time can you estimate kind of how much time you spend networking?
Got it. So there are certain times where I'm going to spend a lot of time. So let's say that I come home from a trade show. I was at a trade show. I have 50 business cards and I really want to make sure that I connect with those. And I don't mean just any 50 business cards. I've got 50 good business cards. Well, I do believe in sending personalized messages. So, especially to somebody that I have got on that list of, wow, they may be valuable to me in the future, or I may be valuable to them. And so I'll send them a note and, hey, it was really nice, talking about blah, blah, blah. And I try to remember what we talked about if I can. If not, then don't worry. But, after a trade show, I'm going to spend a ton of time on a weekly basis. I'll be in LinkedIn. Maybe an hour. I mean, I really not that much unless I've just published an article. When I just publish a LinkedIn article, I spend a lot of time because I go out to all the groups that I'm a member of and I repost my article and I promote it. And, I go back in and I want to see what the, who's been reading it or who's not. But when I said that this is simple, it really doesn't have to be difficult. If you just kind of overcome any barriers in your mind of fear, of anxiety, honestly, people can network 10 minutes a week, 30 minutes a week, tops. Just make sure you're adding people that you meet and make a habit of it. And then be of value from time to time, where you're posting things that make you look like an expert in your field. And you'll spend more time on Facebook with your friends and with your, the cheeseburgers and political opinions than you ever will in LinkedIn if you're doing it right.
There you go. So this is going to be our last question. This person works as an employee in a regulatory type company and has her own real estate investment company on the side. And she's a real estate agent. So her goal is to be a real estate agent full time, primarily investing. So how does she present herself on LinkedIn without creating confusion?
I think that, obviously you have to know what, or at least have an idea of what your current employer would approve of. If it's something that flat out is going to cost you your current job, just don't do it. I mean, I think the good thing about real estate is, real estate is one of those where maybe you can go more head in on Facebook or something like that. And other areas where you might be able to expand your business and then make a smaller mention of it on LinkedIn. I mean, that's just a suggestion. I would say if your company's okay with it, they know that in 2 to 3 years you're not going to be there and there's no danger, then you can move forward a little bit stronger.
Okay, great. Well, unfortunately, our time is running out, and I want to share some quick follow-up information with everyone. But before I do that, thank you so much, Scarlett, for sharing your expertise with us. I know I learned something. I hope that everyone else did. I also want to thank everyone who participated. I hope it was helpful for you. Don't forget to take Scarlett up on her offer to connect with her via LinkedIn. And also for alumni, you can make appointments with advisors in Regis's Center for the Career and Professional Development so they can help you fine-tune your LinkedIn profile. So, you might want to take them up on that. Tomorrow, all attendees will receive an email with some follow-up information, including a 5-question survey, seriously, just 5 quick questions, and a link to the YouTube channel where our webinar recordings will be posted. I'm also pleased to share that our next webinar is scheduled for Tuesday, September 4th. Fiction beer head brewer and Regis Brewing Certificate alumna Brittany Portman will discuss how to brew beer at home. So taking us a little bit of a fun route for next month. You will receive more information about that in the follow-up email as well, so please stay tuned. That's it for everyone. That's it for today. Thank you again, Scarlett and everyone, and have a good day.